There's something about Christmas Eve that always felt a little eerie to me. Maybe it's the way the streets get so quiet late at night, or how the snow muffles every sound, leaving nothing but an unsettling stillness. But what happened last year? That's a kind of quiet I'll never forget. It started as a stupid dare. There were 5 of us, me, my best friend Jake, his girlfriend Lisa, and her younger brother Tommy. We were hanging out at Jake's place that night, sitting around the fireplace with mugs of spiked eggnog, waiting for midnight to roll around. We weren't doing anything special, just watching old Christmas movies and joking around, when Lisa brought up the idea. "You guys ever heard of the Christmas Spirits game?" she asked, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. Jake raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "It's like a séance," Lisa explained. "But you're supposed to do it on Christmas Eve, right before midnight. It's when the veil is thin, or whatever. My grandma used to swear by it." Jake laughed. "Your grandma believed in this stuff?" Lisa shrugged. "She said it worked. But, you know, it's probably just an old wives' tale. Unless, you guys are scared." "Scared?" Tommy piped up. "Of what?" "Christmas ghosts." Lisa smirked. "Exactly. That's all it took to get the ball rolling." Jake, of course, couldn't resist a challenge. Neither could I. And Tommy, well, he'd do anything to prove he wasn't just the kid tagging along. "Fine," Jake said. "What do we do?" Lisa leaned forward, her grin widening. "You need a mirror, a candle, and something personal, like a piece of jewelry or a photo. Then, at 11:59, you stand in front of the mirror, light the candle, and ask the spirits to join you." "What spirits?" I asked, trying not to sound uneasy. "Whatever spirits are around," Lisa said with a shrug. "The idea is, Christmas Eve is when all the energy from the year builds up. That's why people tell ghost stories this time of year." "Sounds like a load of crap," Jake said. "Then you won't mind trying it, will you?" Lisa shot back. And that was it. The challenge was set. We rummaged around Jake's house until we found what we needed. A dusty old mirror from the basement. A half-melted candle from the kitchen drawer. And for the personal items, Lisa made us all pick something. Jake grabbed his dad's old lighter. Tommy chose his class ring. Lisa brought a picture of her and her grandma. I didn't know what to use, so I grabbed the keychain my mom gave me for my birthday last year, a little silver charm shaped like a snowflake. By the time we were ready, it was 11:55. We set the mirror on the coffee table and placed the candle in front of it. Lisa turned off the lights, plunging the room into darkness, except for the faint orange glow of the fire. "This is so dumb," Jake muttered, but I could see the tension in his jaw. Lisa ignored him. She lit the candle, its flickering flame casting strange, twisting shadows on the walls. "Okay," she said. "Everyone put your stuff next to the candle." We did as she said, our small objects forming a circle around the flame. "Now what?" Tommy whispered. "Now," Lisa said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "we ask them to join us." The room felt colder all of a sudden, though the fire was still burning strong. "Who wants to do the honors?" Lisa asked, looking around the group. No one spoke. Finally, Jake rolled his eyes. "Fine. Spirits, or whatever you are, we invite you to join us. Merry Christmas." He said it like a joke, his voice laced with sarcasm. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flame flickered. "Must be a draft," Jake said quickly. But there was no draft. The windows were shut tight, and the room was still. "Do we say anything else?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Lisa hesitated. "I don't know. That's just what my grandma said." We sat there in silence, the candle's flame dancing in the mirror. Jake sighed and leaned back. See? Nothing's happening. I told you. Before he could finish, there was a loud thud from the hallway. We all froze. What was that? Tommy whispered. Jake stood up. Probably the cat. You don't have a cat, Lisa said, her voice trembling. Jake stared down the hallway, his face pale. Then what the hell is it? The hallway was dark, stretching out from the living room like an open mouth. None of us moved at first. Even Jake, who was usually quick to shrug things off, just stood there, staring. Maybe something fell. I offered, my voice shaky. Lisa shook her head. It didn't sound like that. It was heavier. Tommy swallowed hard. Do you think it was the spirits? Jake snorted, but it didn't sound convincing. Don't be ridiculous. Then go check, Lisa shot back. He hesitated, and for a second, I thought he wouldn't do it. But then he straightened his shoulders, grabbed the flashlight from his phone, and headed toward the hallway. Stay here, he said over his shoulder. Be careful, I muttered. The rest of us stayed frozen in place, watching as Jake disappeared down the hall. The light from his phone bobbed up and down, throwing long shadows across the walls. Every creak of the floorboards made my heart jump. Anything? Lisa called after him. No, Jake said, his voice faint. It's just. He stopped. Jake. I called out. The light from his phone vanished. Jake. Lisa shouted, standing up. For a few heart-pounding seconds, there was no response. Then, suddenly, he came stumbling back into the room, his face pale and his breath coming in short gasps. What happened? I asked, my stomach twisting. Jake didn't answer right away. He just stood there, gripping the edge of the couch. Finally, he said, There's nothing there. But I swear I heard something. What did it sound like? Lisa asked, her voice trembling. Jake glanced at her, his eyes wide. Like breathing. The air in the room felt heavier, like something unseen was pressing down on us. Maybe we should stop, I said, looking at Lisa. But she shook her head. We haven't even done anything yet. We lit the candle, I shot back. We invited them. Isn't that enough? Lisa didn't respond. Instead, she reached for the candle. What are you doing? Tommy asked nervously. We need to finish the game, Lisa said. Otherwise. She trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. Lisa leaned closer to the mirror, the candlelight flickering against her face. If there's anyone here, she said softly, we're listening. Show us a sign. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flame flickered again, more violently this time, like it was being blown by a strong wind. We all leaned back instinctively. That's not normal, Tommy stammered. It's the spirits, Lisa whispered. Or the heater, Jake muttered, though his voice lacked conviction. Suddenly, the flame surged, shooting straight up as if doused in gasoline. The room filled with a sharp, acrid smell, and Tommy screamed. Blow it out. I shouted. Lisa tried, but the flame wouldn't budge. She blew harder, panic flashing across her face, but it was like the candle didn't care. Put it out. Jake yelled, grabbing the edge of his hoodie to smother the flame. As soon as the fabric touched the candle, the flame went out, but so did the lights. The living room was plunged into darkness. Guys? Tommy whimpered. I'm here, I said, fumbling for my phone. Me too, Lisa added. Jake didn't say anything. Jake? I called. No answer. I turned on the flashlight on my phone, the beam cutting through the darkness. Jake was standing by the coffee table, his back to us. Jake, I said again, louder this time. He didn't move. I stepped closer, the light shaking in my hand. "Jake, are you okay?" He turned slowly, his face bathed in the dim glow of my phone. His expression was blank, his eyes wide and glassy. "Jake?" Lisa whispered. He opened his mouth, but the voice that came out wasn't his. "They're here." The lights flickered back on, and when we turned toward the mirror, the candle wasn't the only thing reflected. Someone, or something, was standing behind us. The figure in the mirror was unmistakable. Tall, shadowy, and blurred like smoke, it loomed behind us, its edges flickering like static on an old TV. None of us turned around. We couldn't. "Do you see that?" Tommy whispered, his voice barely audible. "Shut up," Jake hissed, his voice shaking. Is it in the room with us?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Lisa was the first to move. Slowly, she reached out and grabbed the edge of the mirror, her fingers trembling. "What are you doing?" I whispered. "Something's wrong with the mirror," she said, her voice hollow. The reflection in the glass rippled, like the surface of a pond disturbed by a stone. The shadowy figure didn't move, it didn't need to. Its presence was suffocating. "Lisa," Jake said sharply. "Don't touch it." But she didn't listen. She tilted the mirror slightly, angling it toward the ceiling, and the figure vanished. For a second, I thought it was over. Then the thud came again. This time, it wasn't from the hallway. It was right behind us. We all spun around at once, Jake holding the poker from the fireplace like a weapon. The room was empty. But the candle. It was lit again. "That's not possible," Lisa whispered, staring at the flame. "I blew it out." "No, you didn't," Jake snapped. "I did. I smothered it." "Well, then how is it burning now?" I asked, my voice rising. The flame flickered in response, casting shadows that stretched and twisted across the walls. "Okay, I'm done," Tommy said, stepping back. "This isn't fun anymore." "It's just a trick," Jake said, though he didn't sound convinced. "What kind of trick?" I asked. "You saw it. The flame wouldn't go out, and now it's back." "That's not a trick, Jake. That's—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The air in the room felt heavier, colder. The faint smell of pine and smoke from the fireplace was gone, replaced by something metallic. "Do you smell that?" Lisa asked. "It's like," I trailed off, the taste of copper sharp on my tongue. "Blood," Tommy whispered. "Shut up," Jake snapped again, but his voice cracked. I glanced at the mirror. The glass was normal now, no ripples, no shadows, but something else caught my eye. The candle's reflection was wrong. In the reflection, the flame was much larger than it was in reality, its light casting harsh, angular shadows that didn't match the room. And then, slowly, the flame began to stretch. "What's happening?" Lisa asked, stepping closer to the mirror. "Don't go near it." I shouted, but it was too late. The flame in the reflection stretched higher, splitting into jagged, spindly limbs. The shadows shifted, forming something vaguely human. And then the reflection smiled. Lisa screamed, stumbling back. The rest of us froze, our eyes locked on the mirror. The figure in the reflection, whatever it was, pressed one of its hands against the glass, its jagged fingers curling. And then the glass cracked. "Smash it!" I yelled, grabbing the poker from Jake. "No!" Lisa shouted, pulling me back. "You can't break it." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what will happen if you do." Before I could respond, the candle's flame surged again, bathing the room in a blinding light. And then it went out. For a moment, the room was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, but I could feel it, the presence of something else in the room. "Guys?" Tommy's voice trembled in the dark. "We're here," I said, my voice shaking. "Where's the mirror?" Lisa whispered. "I don't know," Jake muttered. We fumbled for our phones, the beams of light from our flashlights cutting through the darkness. The mirror was gone. "What the hell?" Jake muttered, spinning in place. "It was right here." "That's not possible," Lisa said, her voice barely above a whisper. Tommy started crying. "We need to get out of here." "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. "Do you hear that?" At first, there was only silence. Then, faintly, I heard it, a soft scratching sound, like nails on glass. "It's coming from the hallway," Lisa whispered. We crept toward the hallway, our flashlights casting long, jittery shadows on the walls. The scratching sound grew louder, more frantic. When we reached the end of the hall, we stopped. The mirror was there, propped up against the wall. But we weren't in the reflection. Instead, the shadowy figure stared back at us, its jagged fingers pressed against the glass. And behind it, faintly visible, were 4 more figures. "What the hell is that?" Jake muttered, stepping back. The figures in the mirror didn't move, but their presence felt oppressive, like the weight of 100 eyes pressing down on us. "We need to end this," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "How?" I asked. Lisa hesitated, her eyes darting toward the candle. "We have to break the connection," she said. She grabbed the candle and held it up. "Lisa, wait," I said. "Are you sure?" Before I could finish, she blew out the flame. The mirror shattered. And everything went quiet. We thought it was over. But later that night, I found something waiting for me in my room. A shard of glass from the mirror. And when I looked into it, I didn't see myself. I saw them. I didn't sleep that night. The shard of mirror sat on my desk, catching the faint glow of the streetlight outside my window. Every time I looked at it, I half expected the figures to reappear. But the glass stayed blank, reflecting only the quiet, dimly lit room. Still, something about it felt wrong. It was cold to the touch, colder than it should have been. And no matter how many times I tried to put it away, sliding it into a drawer, tucking it under my bed, I always ended up pulling it back out. I couldn't explain it. It was like the shard wanted me to look. The next morning, I met Jake, Lisa, and Tommy at the diner. None of us looked like we'd slept. "What the hell was that last night?" Jake asked as soon as I sat down. His voice was sharp, almost accusing. Lisa shook her head. "I don't know. It wasn't supposed to be like that." "Supposed to be like what?" Tommy snapped. "You didn't tell us it could go wrong." "I didn't know." Lisa shot back. "My grandma never said anything about." She stopped, her voice catching. "About what?" I asked. Lisa hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. "About them coming through," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. "So what now?" Jake asked. "We broke the mirror. That should have ended it, right?" "I don't think it's that simple," Lisa said. Jake scoffed. "Of course not. I'm serious," Lisa said, her tone sharp. "When we broke the mirror, we didn't stop them. We just released them." Her words hung in the air like a bad smell. Tommy's face went pale. "You mean, they're still here?" Lisa nodded slowly. "I told them about the shard I'd found in my room." "What do you mean, it's cold?" Jake asked, frowning. "Cold, like, unnatural," I said. "And I don't know why, but I can't stop looking at it." Lisa's face darkened. "That's not good." "Yeah, no kidding," I muttered. "No," she said, shaking her head. "I mean, it's connected. The shards are still part of the mirror. If you have one, they'll find you." Her words sent a chill down my spine. They're already here, I said quietly. After breakfast, we agreed to meet back at Jake's house that night to figure out what to do. In the meantime, I went home and tried to get rid of the shard. I threw it in the trash, but an hour later, it was back on my desk. I threw it out again, this time walking it all the way to the dumpster at the end of the block. But when I got home, it was sitting on my nightstand. It didn't make sense. And then, just before sunset, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Lisa. Something's wrong. Meet at my house now. I didn't ask questions. I grabbed my coat and headed out. When I got to Lisa's house, I found her sitting on the front porch, her face pale and her hands trembling. What happened? I asked. She didn't answer right away. She just handed me her phone. On the screen was a photo. It was a picture of Lisa, taken through her bedroom window. I found this on my bed, she said, her voice shaking. Another Polaroid? I asked. Lisa shook her head. No. A shard. We met back at Jake's an hour later. By then, Tommy had found a shard in his backpack, and Jake had discovered one under the couch. They're following us, Lisa said, pacing the living room. No kidding, Jake muttered. We need to get rid of them, Tommy said, his voice trembling. All of them. Yeah, no problem, Jake said, rolling his eyes. Except they keep coming back. Lisa stopped pacing. Then we need to destroy them. It sounded simple enough. We gathered all the shards we could find, mine, Jake's, Lisa's, and Tommy's, and placed them in a metal box from Jake's garage. Jake grabbed a can of lighter fluid and doused the shards. Then he lit a match and tossed it in. The fire roared to life, the flames consuming the shards in seconds. For a moment, I thought it had worked. But then the fire went out. And the box was empty. What the hell? Jake muttered, poking at the box with a stick. They can't be destroyed, Lisa said quietly. What do we do now? Tommy asked, his voice breaking. Lisa looked at each of us, her face grim. We need to end the game. None of us knew what that meant. But as we sat there, trying to figure out our next move, the lights in Jake's house flickered. And when they came back on, the shards were sitting in a circle on the coffee table. The shards sat in a perfect circle on Jake's coffee table, gleaming in the flickering light. None of us moved. None of us spoke. What does this mean? Tommy finally whispered. It means they're playing with us, Lisa said, her voice trembling. No, Jake snapped. It means we messed up. And now, they're not going to stop until we do whatever the hell they want us to do. What do they want? I asked, my throat dry. Lisa's eyes darted to the shards. To finish the game. The air in the room grew colder, heavier. The silence was thick, pressing against my ears like cotton. I reached out toward one of the shards, and as soon as my fingers brushed its surface, a voice, low, guttural, and distant, echoed in my mind. Come back. I jerked my hand away, my heart pounding. What's wrong? Lisa asked. They're calling us, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean, calling us? Tommy asked, his voice rising. They want us to go back to where it started, I said, staring at the shards. To the mirror. Jake stood up, grabbing the poker from the fireplace. No way. We're not going back to that mirror. Lisa stepped in front of him. We don't have a choice, she said. If we don't end the game, they won't stop. How do we even end it? Tommy asked, tears streaming down his face. Lisa hesitated, then looked at me. We have to finish the ritual. Blow out the candle. Say goodbye. But the mirror's gone, I said. No, it's not, Lisa said quietly. It's still here. Somewhere. We didn't have a better plan. We grabbed the shards and drove back to Jake's house. As we piled into the car, the atmosphere shifted. The streets of Red Pines, usually quiet and comforting, felt foreign and wrong. Shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally long, and every distant creak or whistle of wind sounded like footsteps following us. When we arrived, we headed straight to the living room. The coffee table where the mirror had shattered was still there, and the faint smell of smoke from the candle lingered in the air. "Now what?" Jake asked. Lisa placed the shards in a circle on the table and lit the candle we'd used during the ritual. Its flame flickered weakly, as if it was struggling to stay alive. "We call them," she said, her voice barely steady. The room grew colder with every word Lisa spoke. She recited the same phrases from the night before, her voice trembling but resolute. "If there's anyone here, we invite you to show yourself. We invite you to join us." For a moment, nothing happened. Then the flame surged, growing brighter and taller than before. The air filled with the sharp, metallic tang of blood, and a low hum vibrated through the room. The shards on the table began to shift, moving on their own, forming into a single, jagged circle. And in the center of that circle, the mirror reappeared. It wasn't whole, it was fractured, the cracks glowing faintly with an unnatural light. "That's impossible," Jake muttered, his voice barely audible. "Finish it," Lisa said, her gaze fixed on the mirror. I reached for the candle, my hands trembling. "Wait," Tommy said, grabbing my arm. "What if this makes it worse?" "It can't get worse," Lisa said, her voice flat. I took a deep breath, leaned forward, and blew out the flame. The room went completely dark. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. Then, one by one, other sounds joined in, the soft scrape of nails on glass, faint whispers, the creak of floorboards behind us. And then, a voice. "You can't leave." I turned toward the sound, and my stomach dropped. The figures were back. They stood just beyond the edge of the candlelight, their jagged, angular limbs twisting in impossible ways. Their heads tilted unnaturally to the side, their empty faces locked on us. "We did what you wanted," Lisa said, her voice shaking. "We ended the game." The figures didn't respond. Then one of them stepped forward. It moved slowly, deliberately, its shadow stretching across the room. It reached out, its jagged hand brushing the edge of the table. The shards began to glow, their edges vibrating with a high-pitched hum. "What's happening?" Jake shouted. Lisa grabbed my arm. "They're taking it back." "What does that mean?" I asked, panic rising in my chest. Before she could answer, the figures vanished. And so did the mirror. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The room was eerily still, as if nothing had happened. The shards, the mirror, even the candle, they were all gone. "Is it over?" Tommy asked, his voice trembling. Lisa hesitated. "I think so." But it wasn't. In the days that followed, things started to change. Jake stopped coming to school. Tommy's parents sent him to stay with relatives out of town. Lisa wouldn't answer my calls. And every night, without fail, I found a shard of glass waiting for me. The last time I saw it, it was on my pillow. And when I picked it up, I heard the voice again, whispering in my ear. "You ended nothing." I haven't looked in a mirror since. Because every time I do, I see them. And I know they're still waiting.